Clothing of the Victorian fashion era was restricting and dangerous and caused health issues and suffering for women. Many people considered the Victorian fashion era a deadly era because many deaths were caused by the clothing and the poisons and chemicals used in this era. The Victorian era was named after the Queen of the time, Queen Victoria. The reign of Queen Victoria was from June of 1837 to January of 1901. The social status of a woman was determined by the men in her family, and the social status determined what the woman could wear in this time period. In this era, women would dress for men and just to look pretty in general. Society set ideal body images, and the women of this era would dress in corsets and stuff their dresses and skirts to reshape themselves. Women had little option when it came to dressing in this era because they had very strict rules based off of their social status. Queen Victoria describes this era as having a French romantic style. Women in this era were forced to stay at home all day and take care of the children, and while they had maids and servants to help them, their abilities were severely compromised by the clothing that they wore. Clothing of this era was made to look pretty, not to function. It's pretty impressive that women could still move in the tightness and the layering of their clothing. Women wore so many layers because they were forced to cover up most all of their skin. Layers would get so large to the point where only one woman could sit on a couch at a time, and they would get stuck on furniture and anything, and they would get stuck in doorways, and they had to be shoved into carriages, and sometimes they had to leave their cages outside of the carriage while they would ride in them. Corsets and shapewear were the most popular item of this time and most well known. Corsets were particularly dangerous because they would move the woman's ribs and misalign their spines. Through the years, improvements were made in the corsets, and they had different corsets based on different activities and comfort levels, and they also had corsets for pregnancy and nursing. Women went to many extremes when trying to reach the ideal image of this era. Some women would go to the extremes of swallowing tapeworms to eat the food that they had digested, and then the tapeworms would either crawl out on their own, or women would have to take pills to kill it. And many women would choke on the tapeworms in the process because they would grow pretty big. Aside from the body images, the dyes in the clothes were actually also harmful to the women, as the green dye was made of arsenic, and that dye was used in wallpapers and clothing and many other things, just anything green. And this caused irritations and illnesses. Also, the clothing was never very clean because they didn't have anything like washing machines like we do today. So there were parasites in some of the clothing that carried very deadly diseases. Cotton was one of the most popular fabrics of the time, and cotton was very flammable. And due to the size of the skirts, it was hard to keep them under their control. So dying by catching on fire and burning to death was not very uncommon. Another thing that caused sicknesses in women and men were celluloid combs. Celluloid combs were kept in women's hair as a hairpiece, or used to comb men's beards or hair. Combs would cause skin irritations, leading to the invention of head scratchers. Also use a poison by the name of belladonna to achieve the look of big eyes, which were thought of as beautiful. And even so, knowing it was poison, women would still put it in their eyes. Curling irons back in the day were tongs heated over an open fire, and thus leading to wigs because women would accidentally burn their hair off. Also, most hats were made of mercury at the time, and so that led to other health issues. Most of the makeup of the time was made from lead, and this led to lead poisoning. And this poisoning would cause women's wrists extreme pain, And also, women found it important to have a very pale complexion to make it look like they were rich enough not to have to work in the sun. So they would bleach their faces using arsenic wafers, and this was poison. So something that happened in the Victorian era that still happens today is society setting ideal body images and women wanting to change their bodies to be like these images. So the corsets and shapewear of the Victorian era are similar to what plastic surgery would do to a woman today. And also, putting poison in women's bodies is still a thing, as lip injections and all of these other plastic surgeries are putting poison into your body. And women going to all of these extremes to look a certain way is still going on today. This is just some of the ways that the Victorian era caused suffering and health issues for women.